The siren of the medical transport pierced the silence of the Swiss Alps as Elena Vance stumbled through the snow, chasing the gurney. Under the oxygen mask, Julian Thorne's face was the color of ash. The paramedics shouted instructions in a frantic mix of German and English, their voices striking her eardrums like ice picks. Ventricular fibrillation. Prepare the paddles. 3 months ago, when she received that anonymous email, the photo of the sanitarium terrace had been bathed in golden sunlight. Now, a blizzard was tearing apart the cobalt-blue night sky. Her heels were filled with freezing slush, and the camellia hair clip Julian had pinned behind her ear 10 years ago in Paris, the day they first met, dug painfully into her palm. Patient has a history of heart transplantation. Watch for rejection. Elena lurched forward, slamming into the glass doors of the emergency room. Through the glare and the shrill alarm of the monitors, she finally saw the faint pink scar on Julian's left chest. The mark left by the open-heart surgery after his car accident the year their daughter was born. Memory tore open a jagged hole. The corridor outside the operating room had been this cold back then, too. She had knelt there for 9 hours, clutching a swaddled, newborn Lily. Mrs. Thorne. A nurse handed her a blood-stained jewelry box. Inside the velvet lining, next to the camellia diamond brooch, lay half a wedding band engraved with Elena. She suddenly remembered this morning, when she had burst into the sanitarium and Julian had pulled the ring off and thrown it out the window right in front of her. The platinum band, which had reflected the cold light of the snow, now burned against her fingers. The monitor suddenly flattened into a continuous, mournful wail. Elena saw Julian's hand drop from the edge of the bed. On his wrist, he still wore the Patek Philippe she had given him for their anniversary, blood congealing in the spiderweb cracks of the watch face. Prepare epinephrine. The attending physician's roar snapped her back to reality. Elena's trembling fingers flipped open the hidden compartment of the jewelry box. A yellowed medical report fluttered out. March 15, 2018. Patient, Elena Vance. Gestation, 12 weeks. The notes section read in stark print. Post-heart transplant anti-rejection therapy in progress. Termination of pregnancy recommended. The sound of the blizzard battering the windows seemed to fade. Elena thought of the medical records she had found 4 days ago in a private clinic in Zurich. It turned out he had been buying anti-rejection drugs under an alias for 5 years. It turned out that the 3 hours he disappeared during their daughter's first birthday party were spent in the ER. It turned out he had known all along. The patient's will to live is weak. The nurse held Elena back as she tried to reach for her husband. He was clutching this when he came in. On a blood-soaked sticky note, Julian's sharp handwriting blurred into a tear stain. Don't let her know. As the monitor let out its final cry, Elena finally tore open the collar of her sweater. Under the harsh overhead lights, a jagged scar stretching from her collarbone to her heart gleamed with a pearlescent sheen. Take my blood. 10 years ago, the heart he received was mine. The fatal truth. New York City, Financial District. Julian Thorne stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 88th floor penthouse, the cigar in his fingers burning down to a long stanchion of gray ash. On the desk, a paternity test report vibrated slightly from the thunder rattling the glass. The ink text, paternity excluded, glinted coldly in the morning light. In the dossier delivered by the private investigator 3 days ago lay a candid photo of Elena in a private hospital corridor. The pale blue medicine bottle she was clutching was the exact same brand he had found in the secret compartment of her study this morning. Mr. Thorne, the encrypted Swiss bank account has been activated. His executive assistant pushed a black suitcase to his feet, the cold metal reflecting the crimson vessels in Julian's eyes. The private jet leaves Teterboro in 1 hour. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena popped up. Lily says she misses Daddy. Can you come home for dinner tonight? Julian stared at the screensaver, a photo from his daughter's first birthday, and swallowed the metallic taste of blood rising in his throat. The hair sample he had taken from the nursery last night was currently in a sealed evidence bag at the lab, twisting into a mocking curve. 3 days ago, Grand Hyatt penthouse. The crystal chandelier swayed, casting fragmented light as the storm raged outside. Julian loosened his tie, watching a video on his laptop. In the grainy footage, Elena stood on tiptoe to adjust a man's scarf. The anonymous flash drive was still plugged in. The timestamp read last Wednesday, the day he had flown to London for a merger. Mrs. Thorne visits Lenox Hill Hospital every Wednesday afternoon. The investigator spread photos across the bed. The dates on her prenatal checkups differ from her daughter's birth certificate by 3 months. This is surveillance footage from when she picked up her prescription last month. The pharmacist identified it as a new type of immunosuppressant. Julian suddenly grabbed a glass and smashed it against the wall. Whiskey splattered over the photos, soaking into the image of Elena's neck, turning the red mark there, a fingerprint left by the man in the video, into a blooming bruise. The investigator lowered his voice. We tracked the man last week. He spent 4 hours in the pediatric VIP ward. The child in that bed. The antique clock on a nightstand struck 12. Julian felt for the medicine bottle in the hidden compartment. The foil seal was stamped April 2018, but their daughter's birth certificate said January 2019. The math calculated automatically in his brain. A 40-week pregnancy meant conception in April 2018, the exact month he had been in a coma following his car accident. Stormy night, Thorne Estate basement. When a keypad on the safe beeped in error, Julian remembered that Elena always used their daughter's birthday. He entered 190115, and the mechanical gears began to turn. A yellowed medical journal lay on the velvet lining. The entry for April 3, 2018, pierced his vision. Patient Julian Thorne, acute liver failure due to vehicular trauma, comatose until April 28. Next to it, the prenatal file showed Elena's last menstrual period was April 15th, right in the middle of his coma. The basement lights suddenly cut out. In the green glow of the emergency backup, Julian found a ticket stub hidden in the file. May 1st, 2018, Elena Vance to London. It coincided perfectly with the itinerary of Sebastian Sterling, the heir to the rival Sterling Corporation. His phone screen lit up with a new email. It was a scan of the paternity test, anonymously sent, stamped with the seal of a private hospital owned by Sterling Corp. Thunder cracked overhead, and from a nursery upstairs, his daughter began to cry. Veins bulged on the hand gripping the medicine bottle. In the flash of lightning, the English label was clearly visible. Tacrolimus, potent immunosuppressant. 3:00 a.m. Teterboro Airport VIP Lounge. Julian stuffed the signed divorce papers into an envelope. The wax seal, pressed with the iris crest, had been designed by Elena herself. Beyond the glass wall, the runway lights blurred in the rain like a string of weeping rubies. Here is the final proof you asked for. The investigator handed him one last file. The photo showed Elena stepping out of Sebastian Sterling's Maybach, the baby in her arms wrapped in a blanket embroidered with the Thorne family crest. Julian tore off his wedding ring and dropped it into a champagne flute. Amid the sharp clink of platinum hitting crystal, he saw his reflection in the glass, specifically the scar on his left chest. The life-saving opportunity Elena had begged for on her knees outside the operating room all those years ago. As the private jet punched through the clouds, Julian opened the medicine bottle. Under the reading light, the microcode engraved on the back of the pill became visible, CS 1804. He suddenly realized this was the code for the experimental anti-rejection drug released by Sterling Pharmaceuticals in April 2018. Outside the porthole, lightning split the clouds, illuminating the vow engraved on the inside of his watch. With my blood, I guard your heartbeat. Judgment in the Rain, Empire State Building, 88th floor. Rain exploded against the tempered glass like 1,000 silver snakes. Julian stood before a holographic projection of financial reports, his fingertips swiping through floating streams of blue data. A photo of Elena giving medicine to their daughter suddenly popped up from an encrypted folder. As the pixels sharpened, the hospital wristband on Lily's arm came into focus. The medical ID number, one he knew backward, aligned perfectly with a string of characters from the Sterling medical database. Ding! The third hidden compartment of the safe popped open automatically. He took out the bottle of pale blue pills. Condensation from the bottle ran down his fingers and into his cuff. A memory flashed. Elena lying in the ICU, covered in tubes, clutching a blood-soaked prenatal report, the hum of the monitor mocking his own broken heart. Mr. Thorne, this is the restored surveillance footage from 2018. His assistant's voice came from behind. The hologram shifted to a corridor in Lenox Hill Hospital. In the footage, a pregnant Elena stumbled forward. As a man in a white coat reached out to steady her, his sleeve rode up, revealing a serpentine tattoo. Julian's pupils contracted. That was the mark of the Thorne family shadow security detail. The storm seemed to pierce the hologram, turning into silver arrows striking the carpet. Julian tore off his tie. His watch face reflected the centipede-like scar on his chest. Memory cracked open. He recalled waking up briefly during his coma when the analgesic pump failed. Under the surgical lights, he had seen an organ being removed from Elena, gleaming with a cold, pearlescent light. Check Sebastian Sterling's bone marrow registry from last month. He slammed the bottle onto the mahogany desk. The anti-rejection pills scattered into a bizarre hexagram pattern, and have the Swiss lab trace the blood source. 2:00 a.m., Thorn Estate Garage. The wedding ring inside the bulletproof glass display suddenly buzzed. Julian swiped open the smart panel. A 3D projection showed Elena pacing in the nursery with their daughter. The platinum band on her finger pulsed with a faint light. The tracking chip he had embedded was warning of an abnormal heart rate. The keypad to the panic room suddenly flashed an error. Julian entered his daughter's birthday again, his finger trembling over the enter key. The holographic keyboard projected a red warning. 3 failed attempts will initiate self-destruct sequence. He suddenly remembered Elena often saying their daughter had the same stubborn look he'd had at 18. Crash! The antique clock fell to the floor, spilling the contents of a hidden compartment, a sheaf of manila envelopes. Inside the yellow duty log from the hospital lay a torn ultrasound image. The gestational age next to the fetus had been covered with whiteout. Julian shone a UV light over it, and the concealed text 16 weeks floated up in the cold glow, aligning perfectly with the time of his coma. His phone vibrated. A video call request from an anonymous number. The moment he answered, he saw Elena curled up on an examination table in a London private clinic. Sebastian Sterling's hand was brushing over the scar of her liver transplant. The camera panned to the glass wall, where a calendar reflected in the pane showed May 2nd, 2018. The very day he had received a text from Elena saying she had safely delivered a daughter. Dawn, Hudson River, yacht. The divorce papers snapped in the river wind. Julian watched the sky lighten over the Jersey skyline. Suddenly, the Patek Philippe on his wrist emitted a sharp alarm. It was the medical monitoring program Elena had installed. The holographic ECG on the dial showed his donor heart was in acute rejection. Are you truly not going to listen to her explanation? The assistant handed him a satellite phone. News from Zurich implies that this morning, Mrs. Thorne went to... The sentence was cut off by a sudden explosion. A tongue of fire leaped from the lower deck, dyeing the river water the color of blood. Through the thick smoke, Julian fumbled for the respirator in the emergency cache. As his fingers brushed the filter, he froze. There were indentations on the surface, Elena's unique way of carving Morse code. Translated, the bumpy texture read, "Donor viable." The wind whipped burning scraps of paper past his eyes. He realized they were the charred remains of the original paternity test. As the searchlight from an NYPD helicopter swept the water, Julian saw the ash floating in the air contain microscopic anti-counterfeit fibers. This wasn't standard lab paper. "Mr. Thorne, look out!" At the assistant's scream, a bullet grazed Julian's ear and vanished into the water. In the reflection of a sniper scope on the opposite bank, Julian saw the scar on his left chest glowing with an eerie blue light under infrared, the specific biofluorescent marker of a transplanted organ. The blood code, Mount Sinai Hospital Archives rain, washed over the lead-lined windows. As Julian cracked the encrypted medical files with a decoder, the dust on his fingertips mixed with a pale blue powder. The electronic log from April 2018 flickered on the screen. Elena's records were split into 2 parallel timelines. The official file showed her in obstetrics, but a hidden folder was filled with post-op care notes for a heart transplant. "Mr. Thorne, look at this." The investigator's UV pen slashed across the screen. Deleted footage was being restored frame by frame. On screen, Elena was running in a hospital gown, pursued by 5 men in black through the VIP maternity wing. As she slammed through a security door, protecting her pregnant belly, Julian saw the iris tattoo on the leader's wrist, identical to the ones worn by the keepers at his father's funeral. The file cabinet let out a beep, and a hidden drawer popped open. The scent of formalin hit Julian, making his eyes water. A heart specimen floating in a glass jar was labeled CS 1804-7. The wax seal in the corner was the same design as the engagement ring he had given Elena. "This is a model of your heart rate frequency." The investigator pulled up data from the biolab. The 3D projection showed the heart in the jar beating in perfect synchronization with Julian's current ECG. Rainlight refracted through the jar, creating a rainbow. Julian suddenly recalled a dream that had haunted his coma. Elena's voice piercing the fog of anesthesia. "Give him my heart. It's the only way to fool the rejection." Midnight, Thorne Genetics lab amidst the white mist of the cryo chamber. Julian watched his DNA strand rotate on a holographic screen. Gene editing markers flashed on the 23rd chromosome pair, concentrated in the immune system regions, a prerequisite for long-term organ acceptance. We found nanobots in the anti-rejection pills. The chief researcher magnified the image 1,000,000 times. Tiny mechanical arms were modifying white blood cell receptors. These devices suppress the host attack on a specific donor, but they require a 10-year drug regimen. Julian tore open his shirt. Under the cold light, the scar on his left chest glowed faint blue. Spectral analysis showed a microchip embedded in the subcutaneous tissue, placed there by Elena 3 years ago when she had stitched up his wound herself. The screen flashed red. In a virtual petri dish, his genetic sequence was fusing madly with Elena's liver cells, forming a double helix shaped like a blood-red iris. The most shocking part is this. The researcher, trembling, pulled up a non-disclosure agreement. Mrs. Thorne's genetic sample shows that before she underwent the heart donation surgery, she was already 12 weeks pregnant. The rain battered the bulletproof glass with increasing urgency. Julian stared at 2 overlapping ultrasounds. The outline of the embryo in Elena's womb mirrored the molecular structure of the spleen slice removed from him the night of the crash. 4 a.m. Yacht Club Marina. The divorce papers fluttered in the wind. Julian's hand, holding the pen, hovered in midair. The scent of Elena's perfume suddenly hit him from behind. In the reflection of the glass wall, he saw her dissecting him with a gaze as sharp as a scalpel. Why do you think Sterling's people could get into the Thorne basement? Her fingertip traced the tracker implanted in the back of his neck. Every single one of those anti-rejection pills contains a location chip. For the 269 days you swallowed them, I knew the longitude and latitude of every one of your heartbeats better than you did. Julian turned, knocking over a champagne tower. Amber liquid soaked Elena's couture suit, revealing the raised texture of a scar beneath her collarbone. An old burn from 18 years ago, when she had shielded him from acid. Look at this before you sign. Elena tossed a bloodstained child's wristband onto the table. The nanoscreen lit up with a live feed. In the video, Lily was having blood drawn in the Zurich clinic. The genetic sequence on the vial label matched the code on the pills in his shirt pocket exactly. A geyser of water erupted from the river's surface. Julian tackled Elena onto the reinforced deck. As the bullet punched through the hull, he saw a red mole on the sniper's earlobe. It was the deceased specialist who had performed his transplant 3 years ago. Elena seized the moment to jam a micro-syringe into his carotid artery. As cool blue liquid flooded his veins, he heard her final whisper, "Now, it's your turn for your heart to beat for me." The Crimson Iris, 2018, New York City flashback. The smell of disinfectant was particularly acrid at 3:00 a.m. Elena curled up on the bench outside the ICU, clutching her pregnancy report. The glass reflected her ashen face. The freshly healed incision below her collarbone looked like a centipede eating away her last traces of vitality. "Mrs. Thorne, your body cannot support a pregnancy." 3 days ago, the doctor's pen had nearly pierced the paper. "It's only been 2 years since your heart transplant. The anti-rejection drugs will cause fetal deformities." The rhythmic beeping of the monitor suddenly sped up. Elena touched her abdomen through the glass. Under the blue-striped sheet, Julian looked as thin as paper, the oxygen mask fogging with his labored breathing. His 3rd critical notice this month. "Elena." A raspy voice made her jump, knocking over in forestand with a crash. Julian was awake. His hand, pierced with needles, was reaching out to touch her stomach. His eyes held a shattered light. "I saw the report." Elena's blood ran cold. 5 days ago, when she fainted in the study, Julian had been in London. Now, the heat from his fingertips burned through his hospital gown, making the transplant scar on her own chest throb. "Get rid of it." Julian coughed violently, the monitors screaming. He gripped the sheets, refusing to let the nurses near, his knuckles white as he pointed at the scar over her heart. "You almost died on the table, giving me a heart back then. Now you want to." Blood gushed from his mouth, cutting him off. Elena watched the crimson stain the white bedding, remembering a stormy night when they were 18. In the iris garden behind the Thorne mansion, Julian had bled from the mouth just like this, yet he had held her tight. That day, his ribs had been broken by his illegitimate brother because she had stumbled upon evidence of drug trafficking. "Prepare ECMO." As the doctors shoved her aside, Julian tore off his oxygen mask. His bloodied hand grabbed the jade bracelet on her wrist, the heirloom for the eldest Thorne daughter-in-law. "If I have to choose, I want you to live." 2023, Zurich Private Clinic. The sleek metal safe popped open after a palm scan. As Elena pulled out the stack of medical records, a yellowed photograph slid out. It showed Julian in a pediatric ward, reading a book to Lily. Outside the window, sycamore leaves were edged with gold. The date was September 12th, 2020, Lily's second birthday. You believe it now, Ms. Vance? The silver-haired doctor tapped the desk. Mr. Thorne came for checkups every autumn. He wore a different wig each time. He opened a drawer, revealing 5 black wigs of varying lengths on velvet pads. He said he wanted the child to remember her father looking healthy. Elena's fingernails dug deep into her palms. Her phone buzzed. A new email from the Paris detective. Identity of man in video confirmed. Member of Thorne Corp's secret medical team. Participated in the 2016 transplant surgery. Attached was a photo. The man in the white coat had a red mole on his left earlobe. It was the lover who had intercepted her at the airport this morning. Outside, the alpine wind slapped snow against the glass. Elena suddenly remembered the night before the divorce. Julian had stood by the window looking at the Hudson River, his thin shoulders wrapped in a black turtleneck. He had taken the divorce papers with a light laugh. You're a good actress. Even that honey in the delivery room sounded real. At the time, she thought he was mocking her acting during Lily's birth. Now, she realized the deeper meaning. Her phone album auto-generated a memory, 1 year ago today. It was Julian holding Lily at Disney World. Zooming in 10 times, the faint scar of an ECMO catheter was visible at his neckline, matching the incision point described in the record she now held. Avalanche countdown is T. More at sanitarium, the alarm of the cardiac monitor cut off abruptly at the end of the hall. Elena pressed her forehead against the glass of the emergency room, her breath fogging the pain. The organ donation form the nurse handed her was stained with blood. In the next of kin's signature box, Julian had signed her name 3 years ago. Patient is experiencing hyperacute rejection. The Italian doctor shouted over the drone of machines. The donor heart is attacking the host. Elena grabbed the pen, the tip piercing her skin. The tactile memory of forging a signature on a surgery consent form 10 years ago rushed back. That day, Julian had been in a hepatic coma in the ICU. She had stolen his personal seal and pressed a bloody thumbprint onto a heart donation agreement. Use mine. She tore open her collar, revealing the jagged scar. The heart he has. It was mine to begin with. Amidst the shock in the room, a blonde nurse suddenly lifted Julian's hospital gown. On the man's lean torso, 2 intersecting surgical scars formed a cross under the cold light. Elena's pupils constricted. Those were injuries impossible to sustain from a car accident. 2016 double organ transplant record. The doctor pulled up a tablet. Mr. Thorne received not just a heart, but a liver. The donor came from. An encrypted file popped up a warning. In the reflection of the screen, Elena saw her own pale face. 2013, Manhattan. Rain, flashback rain, washed over the bronze doors of the Plaza Hotel. Elena ran into the downpour, clutching a termination consent form. The diagnosis of a 12-week pregnancy burned in her bag. The assistant's words echoed in her ears. Mr. Thorne is in London preparing for his wedding. The screech of a black Maybach tore through the night. The window rolled down, and Elena saw Julian, his face pale as paper. The front of his suit was stained with blood, his right hand gripping in 4 line he had ripped out. Where are you taking my child? His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. Fresh stitches on his neck bobbed as he swallowed. In the back seat, half buried in bloody gauze within a medical box, was an ultrasound image, the same one she had hidden in the study that morning. Elena stepped back. Julian stumbled out of the car. When his burning palm touched her lower abdomen, the storm seemed to go silent. Amidst the distant horns of river ferries, he unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a chest wrapped in bandages. They took a lobe of my liver this morning for Uncle Arthur's transplant. Do you believe me now? Only then did she notice he was leaning slightly to the right, an ankle monitor blinking beneath his suit pant leg. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Julian shoved her into the car. As a bullet shattered the rearview mirror, he shielded her body, letting out a muffled groan as warm blood soaked into her collar. Those bastards from the family. They were tracking you. He coughed up bloody foam, smiling. His phone screen lit up with an encrypted email. Captured the second young master. Donor heart in cold chain transport. Elena finally saw the needle marks on the back of his neck, characteristic of anti-rejection therapy. 2023. The emergency room blood type match confirmed. The nurse's cry brought Elena back. She watched her blood flow through the tube into Julian's body. The heart monitor suddenly picked up a weak rhythm. The attending physician's pupils shrank as he looked at the lab report. Ms. Vance, you had a heart transplant 10 years ago. The sound of the blizzard outside amplified. Elena followed the doctor's gaze to her wrist. The purple bruising left by post-op complications years ago was glowing with a strange fluorescence. Footsteps rushed down the hall. The Paris detective burst in, phone raised. Mrs. Thorne, the man in the video is... The lights in the ER died. In the 30 seconds before the backup generator kicked in, Elena felt something cold touch the back of her neck. In the darkness, the sinister voice of Julian's assistant whispered, "Since you've discovered the secret of the organ bank, madam, don't blame Mr. Thorne for being ruthless." The monitor let out a long screech. In the chaos, Elena found the wedding ring on Julian's finger. The indentations on the inside of the band pricked her skin. Morse code again. Trembling, she decoded it. SOS. Symbiotic heartbeat, ST. Moritz underground laboscalpel pierced the incubation tank, and pale, blue nutrient fluid poured out, carrying an embryonic specimen with it. Elena stepped over the glass shards toward the main control console. The holographic screen flashed a red warning as it scanned her irises. Julian's vitals flashed wildly on the left. On the right were rows of cloned serial numbers, from CS 1804-1 to CS 1804-12. Each tank reflected a distorted variation of her and Julian's faces. "You finally found this place." A voice processed by a modulator drifted from the ventilation ducts. A hidden door slid open, revealing a withered figure in a wheelchair. Silas Thorne, the family patriarch, had a breathing tube in his throat. Under his skin, nanobots identical to Julian's were moving. "When you cut out your heart back then, I knew it was time to upgrade the plan." Withered fingers pressed a key. 12 clones opened their eyes simultaneously. Their iris patterns matched Lily's birthmark perfectly. "Containers grown from your daughter's stem cells are much more durable than ordinary donors." The gun in Elena's hand shook. The screen showed the ER feed. Julian was clutching the ring, going into ventricular fibrillation. She reached for the cryo box at her lower back. Inside, a slice of heart tissue glowed with a pearlescent sheen, a live sample she had taken from her own chest that morning. 2018, New York underground surgery flashback. The surgical lights burned permanent spots into Elena's retinas. Through the clatter of instruments and the agony of failing anesthesia, Silas Thorne's voice cut through the curtain. "Give the liver to Julian. Keep the heart for the experimental tank. My baby, my baby." Her hoarse cry knocked over a tray. The embryo, gripped by forceps, was dropped into a freezing canister. Julian's biological mother lay dead on the adjacent table. Their hearts beat in sync in the nutrient fluid. "Don't worry, the child's genes have been edited." A researcher injected something into her carotid. "Once Mr. Thorne's body can withstand the transplant, we'll return the womb to you." Elena bit through her tongue in pain. Blood dripped down the monitor wires into the console. As the alarm blared, she saw the organ donation agreement she had signed twisting in a shredder. Julian's name was clearly visible in the spousal consent field. 2023, life and death gamble. Why do you think he's lived this long? Silas pulled up the surveillance feed. On screen, Julian was swapping his anti-rejection meds for vitamins. Since he found out 5 years ago that you tamper with the pills, he's been using his own body as a petri dish. Elena's eyes went wide. The hologram switched to a genome map. Julian's DNA strand was studded with fluorescent markers, each one corresponding to the cells of the organs stolen from her. An explosion rocked the ER above. Elena took the chance to plug the transport box into the main system. Nanobots flooded the ventilation ducts via the cables. Smoke began to rise from the mechanical device on Silas's neck. The 12 clones ruptured one by one, splashing a rainbow of gene-edited fluid across the bulletproof glass. "You calculated the frequency of everyone's heartbeat." Elena tore open her collar, the fresh stitches still weeping blood. "But you forgot that transplants create a symbiotic reaction." As she hit the self-destruct key, every cryo tank in the lab opened. The kidney cells Julian had transplanted to her years ago were now releasing airborne nanobots, injecting them into the remains of every clone. Final chapter, Eternal Frequency ST. Moritz underground operating theater. When the shadowless lights flared on, Elena saw the family crest on the shackles. It was the symbol of the Thorne underground medical base. 5 years ago, when she signed the donation papers here, she had seen the same iris wrapped around a scalpel. Surprised? The 27 private hospitals your husband acquired over the years were all screening for high-quality donors. The assistant turned the dial on the table, lifting Julian's lifeless body. Back then, his father hollowed out his wife's organs to save his mistress. "Mr. Thorn is romantic, sadly, but the electronic cuffs on Elena's wrists suddenly unlocked. She seized the moment to ram the instrument cart. A glass jar of anti-rejection drugs arched through the air, smashing the fire alarm on the wall. Amidst the flashing red lights, she threw herself onto Julian, her fingers finding the faint pulse in his carotid. The heart he has isn't mine. Elena ripped her shirt open further. Under the red warning lights, the centipede scar below her collarbone turned purple. The person on the table that year was his birth mother. The assistant froze, anesthetic gun raised. An explosion echoed from the corridor. The Paris detective smashed through the safety glass, followed by the lover from the video, who now wore an Interpol badge on his white coat. 2016. Mount Sinai Hospital, flashback. The green light of the heart monitor cast double shadows on the mirrored wall. Elena touched Julian's hollow cheek through the glass. It was the 7th day of his coma from congenital cardiomyopathy. The Thorne family lawyer had brought the donation agreement. Young Master Julian's mother is a match. The lawyer pressed a pen into her hand. It is the only chance to keep him alive. When the surgical lights came on, Elena noticed something wrong in the changing room. The fingerprint ID on the donor file showed that the car crash victim was actually the mother Julian had spent 10 years looking for. The mirror suddenly reflected the butler's face. As the needle pricked her neck, she heard a cold laugh. The master wants a double insurance policy. When she woke up in the basement, the stitches in her chest were already being removed. Julian's mother's corpse lay on the next table, her chest cavity as empty as Elena's. But it was Elena's liver that was beating inside Julian. That was the true transplant plan all along. 2023. In the blizzard, he hasn't been taking anti-rejection drugs for years. Elena slammed a syringe into Julian's vein. Pale blue liquid pushed slowly in. This is the antidote to maintain liver function. The medical files decrypted by Interpol unfurled on the projector. The yellowed pages revealed a horrifying truth. Julian's body hosted organs from 3 people. His mother's heart, Elena's liver, and the kidney his father had forcibly transplanted into him before dying. So he could withstand 7 surgeries. The detective pulled open Julian's gown. The scars formed a terrifying map across his torso. The freshest incision was still bleeding. The spleen removal from 3 days ago, done to protect their daughter. Julian convulsed. Elena pressed herself against his cold chest. 2 heartbeats began to overlap in the cacophony of alarms. She finally remembered the delivery room. When Lily let out her first cry, Julian had kissed the scar of her liver transplant. The paternity test was faked by Silas. The detective slammed an evidence box onto the table. He was afraid you'd stop manufacturing the drugs if you found out the truth. The old man has 30 biolabs overseas. The blizzard battered the glass. Julian's eyelashes fluttered. Elena held his hand over the divorce papers. The pen he had used to sign contained a tracking chip, and on the back of the paper, written in lemon juice, were the words, "Escape to latitude 46 degrees, 29 minutes north. Alpine heartbeat as the morning sun of St. Moritz pierced the snow mist. Elena pushed a wheelchair into the glass conservatory. Julian had a temporary pacemaker in his chest. The wedding ring on his right hand glinted softly. The man in the video is my half-brother. He pinned a camellia behind her ear. Father used his heart for a transplant experiment years ago. Lily ran in holding a crayon drawing. It showed the ECGs of the 3 of them connected in a miraculous arc. Julian touched the pale birthmark on the child's neck, the specific marker of his liver cells, now pearlescent in the sunlight. Sirens wailed at the foot of the mountain. Elena buried a USB drive in the pot of irises. It contained a century of the Thorne family's illegal transplant records, now resting quietly with the roots. Julian suddenly squeezed her hand. As the scars of the organ they shared pressed together, the wind carried the sound of church bells. 20 years ago, on a stormy night, a blood-soaked boy had placed a wreath of bloodied irises on her head. 20 years later, under the bright sun, a man who had exchanged his heart 3 times wrote in her palm, "Let me go first this time." Elena smiled and kissed his pale lips. Behind them, the snow mountain collapsed with a roar. In a galaxy formed by fresh snow crystals, 2 broken heartbeats finally synthesized into a complete frequency. Finale. Eternal frequency as the sun pierced the bulletproof glass of the St. Moritz lab. Julian's finger moved. Elena lay on his chest. Beneath their overlapping scars, a triple heartbeat resonated. Her native heart, his transplanted liver, and the pulse transmitted from their daughter via genetic resonance. "Mommy, look." Lily rushed into the room, holding an electronic tablet. The screen showed the live feed of the Thorn Underground lab. The mutated clones were decaying rapidly before their eyes. On the satellite map, the heartbeat curves of the family of three connected to form a brilliant iris. Julian removed his oxygen mask and slid the wedding ring back onto Elena's finger. The molecular formula newly engraved inside the band flashed in the sunlight, the new chromosomal sequence born from their genetic fusion. A boom echoed from the mountain. 12 silver rockets rose from the white mist of the avalanche. Interpol helicopters swept across the sky. Elena tapped Morse code into Julian's palm. I guard this heartbeat now. In the rainbow light refracted by the snow, three fragmented souls finally merged into a complete life form. Their heartbeat frequency traversed the Alps, resonating with every victim across the 5 continents who had been subjected to the Thorn family's organ harvesting, composing the ultimate code that would bring the Dark Empire crumbling down.